Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship UES Horizon as his crew ran the daily system checks. They had been mapping uncharted space for 6 months now, documenting new star systems and looking for planets that might support human colonies. Jake was a calm man in his 40s with graying hair who had spent most of his life exploring the far reaches of space. The ship was small compared to military vessels, but it served its purpose well. Jake's team consisted of 22 specialists who worked together like a well-trained family. They had discovered 3 potentially habitable worlds in the past month, and everyone was feeling good about their progress. Lieutenant Amy Foster was monitoring the long-range sensors when she noticed something unusual. 3 large objects were approaching their position at high speed. She called out to Jake, who immediately came to look at her readings. The objects were clearly artificial and moving in a formation that suggested military purpose. Jake ordered the crew to battle stations even though the Horizon was not built for combat. They had basic shields and a few defensive weapons, but nothing that could match a real warship. As the objects came closer, the sensors revealed ships unlike anything in human databases. The alien vessels were smooth and curved like living creatures. They moved through space with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for machines. Each ship was about twice the size of the Horizon, and they glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake had never seen anything like them before. Captain Ryan Foster was Jake's younger brother and commanded the defense fleet at New Houston Colony. He received Jake's emergency transmission, just as the alien ships surrounded the Horizon. Ryan immediately began mobilizing every available vessel, but he knew they were too far away to help in time. The lead alien ship opened communications using perfect English, which surprised everyone on the bridge. A cold voice spoke through the speakers announcing that they were representatives of the Zephyrian Empire, and that the human vessel had violated restricted space. Jake tried to explain that they had no knowledge of any restrictions, but the aliens were not interested in explanations. The Zephyrian commander demanded that all humans withdraw from this sector of space immediately. He said that humanity was considered a minor species without rights to independent exploration. The human race would submit to the authority of the Galactic Council or face consequences that would ensure their extinction. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been studying intercepted alien communications for months from her laboratory on Earth. She was one of the few humans who understood how other species viewed mankind. Most alien races saw humans as aggressive primitives who had developed space travel too quickly for their own good. The Zephyrians were among the worst in their contempt for younger species. Elena tried to warn the Colonial Defense Committee about the growing threat, but most politicians refused to take her seriously. They believed that diplomatic contact with alien civilizations would be peaceful and beneficial for everyone involved. Elena knew better because she had decoded enough alien messages to understand their true intentions. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded Terra Station, which served as humanity's furthest outpost in this direction. She received multiple reports of alien ship movements in nearby systems and realized that something big was happening. Kate was a veteran officer who had fought pirates and rebels throughout her career, but she had never faced an enemy like this. The Zephyrian fleet began gathering at the edge of human space in numbers that made Kate's blood run cold. Her intelligence officers estimated at least 500 alien warships were taking positions around human colonies. Each ship was more advanced than anything in the human fleet, and they moved with coordination that suggested a single controlling intelligence. President Lisa Carter called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Senate when news of the alien ultimatum reached Earth. The senators argued for hours about how to respond to this unprecedented threat. Some wanted to negotiate while others demanded immediate military action. Most had no idea how serious the situation really was. Dr. Helen Chang worked in the deepest levels of the Titan shipyards on a project so classified that only a few dozen people knew it existed. She had been developing new technologies based on archaeological discoveries made on ancient human sites. The work was dangerous and often seemed to violate known laws of physics. Helen's team had found strange blueprints buried in caves that were millions of years old. The designs showed massive ships that could harness energies beyond current human understanding. Most scientists dismissed the findings as impossible, but Helen believed they represented something important about humanity's hidden past. Captain Steve Parker commanded a patrol ship near the outer colonies when he detected the first Zephyrian scout vessels. They were fast and stealthy, clearly mapping human defensive positions for a future attack. Steve tried to intercept one of the scouts, but his ship was too slow to catch the alien vessel. The Zephyrians were methodical in their approach to warfare. They studied every human installation and cataloged every defensive weapon. Their scouts reported back to the main fleet with detailed information about human capabilities and weaknesses. It became clear that they were planning something far worse than a simple invasion. Jake Morrison remained a prisoner aboard his own ship as the Zephyrians began their systematic advance through human territory. He watched helplessly as alien forces moved from system to system, demanding submission from every human settlement they encountered. Some colonies tried to resist, but their defensive fleets were destroyed within hours. The aliens gave humanity 7 days to accept complete surrender. All human military forces would be disbanded, and human worlds would be governed by Zephyrian administrators. Any attempt at resistance would result in the total destruction of human civilization. The ultimatum was broadcast to every human world simultaneously. Elena Rodriguez worked frantically to decode more alien communications as the deadline approached. She discovered that the Zephyrians were part of something called the Galactic Council, which included 12 ancient alien races. These elder species had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years and saw younger races as nothing more than potential slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. Admiral Kate Sullivan knew that humanity's conventional forces could not win against the Zephyrian fleet. The alien ships were simply too advanced and too numerous. She began planning desperate defensive strategies, but privately wondered if there was any hope at all for human survival. Deep in the Titan shipyards, Helen Chang received orders to accelerate her secret project regardless of the risks involved. The government was willing to try anything that might give humanity a chance against the alien threat. Helen and her team began working around the clock to complete something that might change the course of the coming war. Professor Nathan Blake had spent 20 years studying the ruins on dead worlds across the galaxy. He was a tall, thin man with kind eyes who believed that ancient civilizations held secrets that could help humanity understand its place among the stars. Nathan worked alone most of the time because other scientists thought his theories were too wild to be taken seriously. The ruins on Kepler 442b were different from anything Nathan had seen before. The planet had been dead for millions of years, but the stone structures remained perfectly preserved. Strange symbols covered every wall, and Nathan spent weeks trying to decode their meaning. The language was older than any known alien writing system. Captain Amy Turner commanded the research vessel UES Discovery, which had brought Nathan to this forgotten world. She was a practical woman who cared more about keeping her crew safe than chasing ancient mysteries. Amy watched nervously as Zephyrian ships began appearing in nearby systems while Nathan continued his work in the ruins below. The breakthrough came when Nathan realized the symbols were not just writing but also mathematical formulas. The ancient builders had left behind detailed descriptions of technologies that seemed impossible, even by current standards. They wrote about ships that could travel between dimensions and weapons that could destroy entire star systems with a single shot. Dr. Alice Morgan was Nathan's research partner and the only person who truly believed in his work. She was young and eager to prove that humanity's past held more secrets than anyone imagined. Alice helped translate the most important tablets which spoke of a prophecy that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. The prophecy described a young race that would emerge from the outer edges of known space. These newcomers would possess ancient knowledge and build vessels that could challenge the elder races who had ruled for countless generations. The tablets were very specific about when and how this would happen. Nathan felt his heart racing as he read about the young race's characteristics. They would be curious explorers who spread quickly across many worlds. They would be fierce fighters when threatened, but also capable of great compassion. Most importantly, they would carry within them the genetic legacy of the galaxy's first intelligent species. General Paul Adams received Nathan's initial report, just as the Zephyrian deadline was approaching. Paul was a military man who normally had no time for archaeological theories, but the current crisis made him willing to consider any possible advantage. He ordered a full team of specialists to help Nathan decode the remaining tablets. The ancient texts revealed that the first intelligent race had evolved on a small blue world in the outer rim millions of years ago. They had achieved incredible technological advancement before leaving their home planet to explore the universe beyond. Before departing, they had planted seeds of their knowledge in hidden locations across the galaxy. Captain Danny Clark was one of the military pilots assigned to protect the archaeological team. He found the whole situation strange but followed orders like a good soldier. Danny had flown combat missions against pirates and rebels, but nothing had prepared him for the possibility of fighting alien empires with advanced technology. The tablets described massive construction projects that the ancient race had completed before their departure. They had built ships so large that they could house entire civilizations and equipped them with technologies that drew power from the fabric of reality itself. These vessels were hidden in secret locations waiting for the right time to be activated. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived at the dig site with a team of linguists to help with the translation work. She brought with her the intercepted Zephyrian communications, which contained references to ancient warnings that the alien empire had dismissed as mythology. The connections between the tablets and alien fears began to emerge clearly. Nathan discovered that the ancient race had not simply vanished, but had evolved beyond physical form. They continued to watch the galaxy and guide the development of younger species who showed potential. Humanity had been chosen as their inheritors because of specific genetic markers that marked them as descendants of the original builders. The prophecy stated that when the young race faced extinction, from the elder powers they would awaken to their true heritage. Hidden knowledge would surface and dormant technologies would activate. The great ships would rise from their resting places to defend their chosen successors. Amy Turner reported increasing Zephyrian activity in the system as more alien scouts arrived to monitor the human research effort. She urged Nathan to finish his work quickly because it was becoming dangerous to remain on the planet. The aliens seemed particularly interested in preventing humans from accessing the ancient ruins. Dr. Helen Chang received copies of the translated tablets at her secret facility in the Titan shipyards. The ancient blueprints matched perfectly with the designs her team had discovered in Earth's deepest archaeological sites. Everything began to make sense as she realized that humanity had been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. The tablets revealed the locations of 12 massive ships hidden throughout the galaxy. Each vessel was designed for a specific purpose in the coming conflict. The largest and most powerful was hidden in a pocket dimension that could only be accessed when humanity truly needed it. Nathan found detailed instructions for awakening the ancient technologies. The process required a specific combination of human genetic patterns, technological knowledge, and desperate need. All three conditions were rapidly being met as the Zephyrian threat grew stronger. Colonel Beth Williams arrived with a full military escort to secure the dig site and transport the archaeological team to safety. She was a tough combat veteran who understood the strategic importance of Nathan's discoveries. Beth organized the evacuation while her soldiers held off increasing alien probe activities. The final tablets contained a warning about the consequences of awakening the ancient legacy. The technologies were incredibly powerful, but they would also mark humanity as a threat to every established power in the galaxy. Once activated, there would be no going back to the way things were before. Dr. Grace Miller analyzed the genetic requirements mentioned in the prophecy and confirmed that modern humans carried the necessary markers. The ancient race had indeed planted their seeds in humanity's ancestors before leaving Earth millions of years ago. Humans were the legitimate heirs to technologies that predated galactic civilization. As the research team prepared to leave Kepler 442b, Nathan took one last look at the ancient ruins. He knew that their discoveries would change everything, but he also understood that humanity would need every possible advantage in the coming war. The prophecy was already beginning to fulfill itself as hidden systems across human space started responding to signals that had been dormant for ages. Admiral Jack Bennett stood on the command deck of Proxima Base, watching the largest alien fleet in recorded history approach his position. The Zephyrian armada stretched across space like a dark cloud that blocked out the stars themselves. Jack counted over 3,000 enemy vessels of various sizes, all moving in perfect formation toward his base, and the 12 million civilians who called it home. The Human Defense Fleet consisted of 42 ships ranging from heavy cruisers to small patrol craft. Every vessel was outdated compared to Zephyrian technology, and Jack knew his forces would be completely outmatched in direct combat. His only hope was to delay the enemy long, enough for the civilian evacuation ships to reach safe distance. Colonel Beth Williams commanded the base's ground defense, systems from the military command center deep underground. She had 2,000 Marines and a collection of defensive weapons that seemed pitiful compared to what was coming. Beth watched her tactical displays as Zephyrian dropships began, launching from the main fleet to begin the ground assault phase. The alien bioships moved through, space-like living creatures rather than mechanical constructs. They pulsed with energy patterns that resembled heartbeats and their weapons charged with colors that hurt to look at directly. Jack had studied every piece of intelligence about Zephyrian technology, but seeing it in person was far more terrifying than any report could convey. Captain Steve Parker piloted his destroyer UES, defiant in a desperate attempt to protect the fleeing civilian transports. His ship had already taken heavy damage from the first wave of alien fighters, and several of his key systems were failing. Steve knew his vessel would not survive another direct attack, but he refused to abandon his duty to the innocent people trying to escape. Dr. Alice Morgan worked frantically in her laboratory to complete the quantum transmission array that would broadcast the ancient technological data to every human world simultaneously. The device was humanity's insurance policy to ensure that the knowledge would survive even if Proxima Base was completely destroyed. Alice's hands shook as she connected the final circuits while explosions rocked the station around her. The Zephyrian attack began with a bombardment that lit up space like a miniature sun. Their energy weapons struck human ships and vaporized armor plating that should have been able to withstand anything short of a nuclear explosion. Jack watched in horror as 3 of his cruisers simply disappeared in brilliant flashes of light. Beth's Marines fought bravely as alien shock troops breached the outer defensive perimeters. The Zephyrians were tall insect-like creatures with crystalline armor that deflected most human weapons. They moved in coordinated swarms that overwhelmed defensive positions through sheer numbers and superior firepower. The civilian evacuation was proceeding too slowly as families struggled to reach the transport ships while alien fighters strafed the docking areas. Captain Amy Turner commanded one of the largest evacuation vessels and managed to load over 10,000 refugees before enemy fire damaged her ship's engines. She limped away from the station while making emergency repairs to her propulsion system. Steve Parker's destroyer engaged a group of Zephyrian attack craft that were pursuing the civilian ships. The Defiance weapons managed to destroy 2 alien fighters before a concentrated energy beam punched through the ship's main hull. Steve felt the deck buckle beneath his feet as atmosphere vented into space through the massive breach. Jack ordered his remaining ships to form a defensive screen around the evacuation transports while he prepared Proxima Base for a final stand. The station's heavy weapons were powerful enough to damage Zephyrian vessels, but there were simply too many targets to engage effectively. His tactical officer reported that they were being overwhelmed on all fronts. The alien ground forces reached the outer residential sections and began systematically destroying everything in their path. Beth's Marines fought a running battle through the station's corridors, but they were being pushed back toward the central core. She knew they could not hold their positions much longer against the alien advance. Dr. Grace Miller monitored the base's main power systems as they came under increasing strain from the battle damage. Several fusion reactors had been damaged by alien bombardment, and the remaining generators were operating beyond safe limits. Grace worked to reroute power to the most critical systems while hoping the reactors would not explode. The quantum transmission array was almost ready when a Zephyrian strike team breached Alice's laboratory section. She could hear alien voices and the sound of energy weapons getting closer as she made the final adjustments to the device. Alice activated the transmission sequence just as the laboratory door exploded inward. Steve Parker managed to get his crew into escape pods before the Defiance suffered complete structural failure. He watched from his pod's small window as his ship broke apart in a shower of debris and sparks. The destroyer had served its purpose by giving the civilian transports more time to escape, but Steve felt the loss of his vessel like a physical wound. Jack received reports that over half the civilian population had successfully evacuated before the alien forces overwhelmed the docking areas. The remaining refugees were trapped on the station as Zephyrian ships surrounded the structure and began preparing for the final assault. Jack knew this would be where humanity made its last stand in this sector. The ancient technology data successfully transmitted across human space, just as Alice's laboratory was overrun by alien troops. The quantum signal reached every human world simultaneously and began activating dormant systems that had been waiting for millions of years. Something stirred in the deepest levels of human space installations. Beth's remaining Marines retreated to the command center as alien forces controlled most of the station. She sealed the blast doors and prepared for a siege while hoping that the evacuation ships would reach safety before Proxima Base was completely destroyed. The sounds of alien weapons grew louder as they cut through the outer barriers. Deep in space beyond the edge of the system, long-range sensors detected something massive approaching at impossible speed. The gravity signature was unlike anything in known databases, and it seemed to be moving through dimensions that normal physics could not explain. Jack stared at his displays in confusion as space itself began to ripple. The Zephyrian fleet commanders noticed the strange readings but dismissed them as sensor malfunctions caused by battle damage. They focused their attention on completing the destruction of Proxima Base and eliminating the last pocket of human resistance. The aliens had no idea that something ancient and terrible was awakening in response to humanity's desperate need. Admiral Mike Crawford had never seen anything like the vessel that surrounded him as he walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The UES Leviathan was not just a ship, but a living monument to technologies that humanity was only beginning to understand. Mike was a veteran officer who had commanded many vessels during his career, but nothing had prepared him for this responsibility. The ship measured 47 kilometers from bow to stern, making it larger than most human cities. Its hull was composed of a strange metal that seemed to repair itself when damaged and could adapt to different types of enemy weapons. The corridors pulsed with soft light that followed the crew members as they moved through the massive structure. Chief Engineer Linda Hayes stood in the main engineering section, watching displays that showed power levels beyond anything she had ever imagined. The quantum drives were drawing energy directly from parallel dimensions through processes that violated every law of physics she had learned in school. Linda felt both excited and terrified as she monitored systems that could power an entire star system. The ancient blueprints had been precise in their specifications, but actually building the Leviathan had required materials and techniques that pushed human technology to its absolute limits. Dr. Helen Chang had supervised every step of the construction process while teams of scientists worked to understand principles that seemed like magic. Captain Danny Clark commanded the ship's fighter squadrons, which consisted of craft that were individually more powerful than most alien cruisers. The fighters themselves seemed almost alive and bonded with their pilots through neural interfaces that created a connection deeper than anything Danny had experienced. His pilots reported feeling as if their consciousness had expanded beyond their physical bodies. The Leviathan's crew of 12,000 represented the finest minds and warriors that humanity could produce. They had been selected not just for their skills but also for genetic markers that allowed them to interface with the ancient systems. Every person aboard the ship could feel the vessel's awareness touching their minds in ways that were both comforting and strange. Dr. Grace Miller worked in the ship's core to activate the consciousness interface system that would connect every crew member into a collective awareness while preserving their individual identities. The technology was based on principles that the ancient builders had developed to allow their massive ships to function as single organisms rather than collections of separate parts. Mike walked onto the main bridge, which was unlike any command center he had ever seen. The walls displayed three-dimensional images of space around the ship, while holographic controls responded to thought as much as touch. He could feel the Leviathan's artificial intelligence waiting patiently for his commands, while monitoring thousands of systems simultaneously. The ship's weapons were beyond anything in human imagination. The main guns could fire concentrated beams of pure energy that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The defensive systems included shields that could deflect attacks by shifting them into parallel realities where they would harmlessly disperse. Linda reported that all systems were operating within normal parameters, although normal was a relative term when dealing with technology that drew power from the fundamental forces of the universe. The quantum cores hummed with energies that could crack planets while the ship's hull remained perfectly stable and secure. Danny's fighter pilots completed their final checks as they prepared for their first real combat mission. The fighters responded to their thoughts and emotions in ways that made traditional flight controls seem primitive. Each craft was equipped with miniature versions of the ship's dimensional weapons that could punch through any known armor. The consciousness interface activated smoothly as Grace completed the startup sequence. Every crew member felt their awareness expand as they became part of something larger than themselves. They retained their individual personalities and memories, but could now share thoughts and emotions with their fellow crew members instantly. Mike felt the collective consciousness of his crew flowing through his mind as he took command of the most powerful vessel ever constructed. 12,000 human minds worked together while the ship's artificial intelligence coordinated their efforts into a seamless whole. The Leviathan was ready for battle. The ship's sensors detected the desperate fight at Proxima Base from across the galaxy as the quantum transmission array sent out its final signals. Mike knew that human civilians were dying while alien forces celebrated what they believed was their final victory over mankind. The time had come to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of achieving. Helen monitored the dimensional drives as they prepared to fold space around the Leviathan for its first combat jump. The ship would travel through higher dimensions, where normal physics did not apply, and emerge at Proxima Base faster than light could travel. The ancient builders had mastered technologies that made faster-than-light travel seem slow. The crew felt a strange sensation as reality bent around them during the dimensional transition. Space and time twisted in ways that human minds were not designed to comprehend, but the consciousness interface helped them process the experience without losing their sanity. They were traveling through realms that existed beyond normal universe. Grace reported that all crew members had successfully adapted to the dimensional transition without any adverse effects. The ancient technologies seemed to be designed specifically for human psychology and biology, as if the builders had known exactly what their inheritors would need. Mike stood ready to give the order that would announce humanity's presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The Leviathan would emerge from hyperspace above Proxima Base like an ancient god awakening from eternal slumber. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that they had underestimated their enemy. Danny felt his pilot's excitement and determination flowing through the neural links as they prepared to launch their first attack against alien forces. The fighters were eager to prove themselves in battle, while their human pilots shared the same desire to protect their people and their worlds. The Leviathan's artificial intelligence reported that all systems were ready for combat operations. The ship's weapons were charged, and its defenses were active while the crew worked together with perfect coordination. Humanity's greatest achievement was about to change the course of galactic history. Linda watched her displays as the quantum drives reached full power and prepared to tear a hole in reality itself. The ship would emerge at Proxima Base in moments, and the real battle for humanity's survival would begin. The ancient prophecy was about to be fulfilled in the most spectacular way imaginable. The space around Proxima Base suddenly twisted and bent as reality itself seemed to tear apart at the edges. Admiral Jack Bennett watched his tactical displays in amazement as something impossibly large began emerging from what appeared to be a hole in the fabric of space itself. The gravity readings were off every scale his instruments could measure. The UES Leviathan materialized above the battle like an ancient mountain floating in the void. The massive vessel stretched across space for dozens of kilometers, while its hull glowed with energies that made the stars themselves seem dim by comparison. Every ship in the Zephyrian fleet stopped, firing as their commanders tried to comprehend what they were. Seeing Fleet Admiral Tony Roberts stood on the Leviathan's quantum bridge, feeling the collective consciousness of 12,000 crew members flowing through his mind. Tony was humanity's most experienced fleet commander, and he understood that this moment would determine whether his species survived or joined the countless extinct races that had challenged the Elder Powers. The Zephyrian fleet commanders felt something they had never experienced in their long military careers. Fear crept through their hive-mind consciousness as they realized they were facing technology that predated their civilization by millions of years. Their bioships, which had dominated galactic warfare for millennia, suddenly seemed small and fragile. Tony opened communications channels that reached every ship in both fleets simultaneously. His voice carried the authority of ancient powers as he announced that humanity would defend itself and its right to exist among the stars. Any race that threatened human worlds would face consequences that would reshape their understanding of warfare itself. Captain Danny Clark launched his fighter squadrons from the Leviathan's massive hangar bays. The human fighters moved through space with impossible grace while their pilots shared thoughts and emotions through neural links that made them function as extensions of a single mind. Each small craft carried weapons that could destroy ships 100 times their size. The Zephyrian commanders ordered their fleet to attack, but their weapons had no effect on the Leviathan's advanced shielding systems. Energy beams that could vaporize human cruisers simply disappeared when they struck the ancient vessel's defensive barriers. The alien fleet found itself completely outmatched by technology they could not understand. Commander Rachel Davis worked in the Leviathan Xenobiology section, monitoring alien communications as panic spread through the Zephyrian fleet. She listened to their desperate messages as ship commanders reported that their most powerful weapons were useless against the human vessel. The alien hive mind was experiencing something close to complete breakdown. Tony gave the order to demonstrate the Leviathan's true power as the ship's main weapons began charging with energies drawn from parallel dimensions. The quantum cannons did not simply destroy enemy vessels, but erased them from reality itself. Zephyrian bioships that had existed for centuries vanished without leaving any trace behind. The battle lasted less than an hour as the Leviathan's weapons systematically eliminated every alien vessel that remained in the combat zone. Danny's fighters swept through the Zephyrian formations like hunters among prey, while the main ship's guns removed entire squadrons from existence with single shots. Admiral Jack Bennett watched from Proxima Base as the alien fleet that had seemed invincible was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing in terror. The Leviathan moved through space with calm purpose while its weapons reached out across impossible distances to touch enemy ships that thought they were safe. Rachel established contact with the surviving Zephyrian commanders and offered them a choice that their species had never given to others. They could withdraw immediately and never threaten humanity again, or they could face the complete annihilation of everything they had built over thousands of years of galactic dominance. The alien commanders, who had been so confident in their superiority just hours before now, begged for mercy from the species they had dismissed as primitive. Their hive mind reeled from losses it could not process, while ancient fears awakened in Rachel, memories that spoke of powers beyond comprehension. Tony accepted the Zephyrian surrender, but made it clear that this was humanity's final warning to all alien races. The age of treating humans as inferior beings was ending, and any species that continued to threaten human worlds would discover why the ancient builders had chosen mankind as their inheritors. News of the battle spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks that carried the story to every inhabited system within hours. The Galactic Council, which had ruled through fear and superior technology for thousands of years, found their authority challenged by a species they had planned to exterminate. Dr. Kevin White worked in the Leviathan's historical documentation center, recording the moment when humanity stepped onto the galactic stage not as victims but as the inheritors of a legacy that stretched back to the dawn of civilization. The young race had claimed its birthright, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ancient races that had slumbered for millions of years began to stir as they recognized signs described in their oldest texts. The prophecy that most had dismissed as mythology was being fulfilled before their eyes as humanity awakened to its true heritage and purpose. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session as reports arrived of human ships appearing throughout their territory. Each vessel carried weapons based on the ancient technologies and crews that seemed to share a collective awareness that made them incredibly effective in battle. Rachel monitored communications from dozens of alien species as they struggled to understand how a primitive race had suddenly become the most powerful force in known space. Some offered immediate friendship, while others began planning desperate alliances to contain the human threat. Tony knew that there would be no going back to the peaceful existence that humanity had hoped for when they first reached for the stars. The galaxy was full of ancient enemies and potential allies, while humanity stood at the center of changes that would reshape the cosmic order. The Leviathan departed Proxima Base with its quantum wake rippling through dimensions that most species could not even detect. Behind it, the rescued human civilians looked up at the stars with new hope, while ahead lay a galaxy that would learn to respect the power of awakened humanity. Every species in known space received the same message as the great ship passed through their territory.
Humanity had awakened and claimed its inheritance while the age of the elder races was coming to an end.
The stars themselves whispered of changes that would echo through eternity as the galaxy stood frozen before the power of mankind unleashed.